Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. We have a lot to break down today, including the second weekend of Spider-Man Brand New Day, the continued box office run of the Odyssey, and so much more. So let's jump right into the actual box office numbers from this past weekend. And the number one film for a second weekend in a row, of course, was Spider-Man Brand New Day, which dropped 59.9% to bring in $144.2 million. Its domestic total now through 10 days of release is at $654.3 million, and there's a lot to break down there that we'll talk about in a few minutes. The Odyssey actually had a smaller drop in its fourth weekend than I anticipated. It dropped 37.9% to bring in another $31.7 million, considering the fact that it was splitting IMAX screens. In some cases, it lost IMAX screens completely to Spider-Man Brand New Day. I was expecting something a little steeper, but it continues to hold well, and it's now over $460 million domestic. In third place, a distant third, was One Night Only, which many people have jokingly called, or perhaps not so jokingly called, The Sex Purge. It's a rom-com starring Monica Barbaro and Callum Turner. It opened to $5.5 million. Toy Story 5 spent an eighth week in the top five, with a 37.7% drop and a $4.2 million weekend gross. It's now at $470.6 million domestically. Super Troopers 3 opened in fifth place to just over $4 million, not a box office high watermark for that franchise. Speaking of movies that aren't setting a box office high watermark, Minions & Monsters made $3.5 million in its sixth week of release for a $176.3 million total, and Moana brought in $2.9 million in its fifth week of release for a $121.6 million domestic total. Eli Roth's latest film, Ice Cream Man, opened to just over $2 million amid very bad reviews and a lot of criticism over the disclosure of the use of generative AI in the film. The Invite is in ninth place in its seventh week of release with just over $700,000. It's approaching $25 million domestic. And rounding out the top 10, we see this at the box office at the end of every summer. We have Cat Video Fest 2026, which made just over $500,000. Four movies dropped out of the top 10 this past weekend. Young Washington is out after 5 weeks. Evil Dead Burn is out after 4 weeks. Hadestown the Musical, after an extended run in theaters, is out of the top 10 after 2 weeks. And I Want Your Sex ends its run in the top 10 after just 1 week. And look at the biggest theater count changes for this past weekend. Hadestown the Musical lost most of its theaters, over 1,000 of them, although it was still in 481. Minions & Monsters lost 572 theaters. It's now in 2,451. Motor City lost almost every theater it had left. It lost 567 and remained in just 33. Moana lost another 545 theaters. It's now in 2,465. And Evil Dead Burn is almost out of release. It lost 464 theaters. It's still in 178. Here's how this past weekend at the box office looked as compared to the same weekend in 2025, which saw the opening of Weapons. And while that was a very successful film, you can also see that Spider-Man and the Odyssey have brought the box office to new heights. This past weekend was up 53.9% over the same weekend last year. Of course, coming down big from that huge spike we saw with Spider-Man's opening weekend, but still a very substantial increase over what we saw this time last year. To put it into context, we're right now, or actually I should say through Sunday, only about $30 million shy of matching the box office total for the entire month of August last year. So 10 days into the month, we've almost made what we did all of August last year, and that's really the Spider-Man effect with a big assist from the Odyssey. And Spider-Man Brand New Day is officially the number one grossing movie of the summer. It's up 2 spots from last week with $654.3 million. It's going to be number one. Toy Story 5 gets bumped down to number 2. The Odyssey's at number 3 for right now, but it's closing very quickly on Toy Story, so it looks like it will be the second highest grossing movie of the summer. Obsession and The Devil Wears Prada 2 round out the top 5. Then we have Backrooms, The Mandalorian and Grogu, Minions & Monsters, Moana, which is up 1 spot to number 9, and Disclosure Day, which is down 1 spot to number 10. And when we look at that summer box office chart, I actually had to go back and recheck this for myself. This is actually the first time ever that there have been 3 movies released in one summer that made over $400 million. And the reason is that Marvel played it a little bit fast and loose with the release of Avengers Endgame and Avengers Infinity War. Those were released on the last weekend of April, which falls outside of the summer release window. Those were technically spring movies, not summer movies. And that leaves this summer to be the first time with $400+ million grossers. And even if you include Avengers Endgame and Infinity War, then this is the third time it's happened. It happened in 2018, 2019, and this year. So we are seeing signs of rising, at least box office grosses. There's a lot of other things you can talk about, but I was shocked when I went back and said, well, surely it's happened at least once before. If you're being strict about when summer movie season is, then summer of 2026 will go down as the first year that 3 movies grossed over $400 million. Now, if nothing really breaks out in the month of August, and something may, it could be the end of Oak Street, which opens this weekend, or another movie, these are going to be your top 10 summer movies. And let's look at that list compared to how I predicted the summer would go back in late April. Not a great record for me. I'm going to save the hardcore analysis for 2 or 3 weeks from now when I do my final breakdown of the summer. The one thing that's weird is The Mandalorian and Grogu and Disclosure Day at number 7 and number 10 were 2 of my predictions I was the least sure about, and right now they are locked in to those positions. Everything above that is just a mess, but we are now at the end game, really, no pun intended, of the summer box office for this year, and I'm already preparing a full comprehensive breakdown once we know exactly what those top 10 movies are going to be. So let's take a look at Spider-Man Brand New Day's second weekend in theaters after it broke a whole slew of box office records last weekend. And while it was not the highest grossing second weekend of all time, it was pretty close. It came in third place, about $5 million behind Star Wars The Force Awakens, which made $149.2 million in its second weekend. That was over the Christmas holiday, which is one of the busiest movie-going parts of the year. And it was only about $3 million behind the second weekend of Avengers Endgame, which made $147.3 million. Spider-Man Brand New Day is in third place, healthily above Avengers Infinity War, which made $114.7 million in its second weekend. Then we have Black Panther, Jurassic World, The Avengers, Inside Out 2, Deadpool and Wolverine, and Barbie. But I also want to look at second weekends all time when you adjust for inflation, and adjusting for inflation has been a heavy topic of discussion. If you want to see what I think about adjusting box office numbers for inflation, I did a whole video on it that I put out yesterday, and I'm actually going to point everybody to that video from now on if you want to know why I use inflation-adjusted numbers and why I think they're important. It's not the end-all, be-all, but I think it gives us some historical context for movies across different decades and across generations. So if you have any questions about why I adjust for inflation or use those numbers, just go watch that video and we'll carry on with charts. So these are the top second weekends all time when you adjust for inflation, and Star Wars The Force Awakens still comes out on top with an adjusted total of $216.2 million back in 2015. Avengers Endgame comes in second at $193.3 million. Then we have The Avengers at $157 million, Jurassic World at $154.4 million, Avengers Infinity War at $153.3 million, Black Panther at $149.1 million, and then Spider-Man Brand New Day. When you adjust for inflation, it had the 7th best second weekend of all time. Still not too shabby, and it comes in actually just ahead of the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man, which made $142.5 million adjusted for inflation. Then we have the second weekend of Shrek 2 back in 2004, and Beauty and the Beast in 2017 rounds out the top 10 at $123.2 million. This is what the drop-off in the second weekend for Spider-Man Brand New Day looks like compared to all of the other movies in the MCU. The ones in orange are the post-pandemic MCU releases. And I say Spider-Man Brand New Day comes in at kind of the, I guess you call it maybe the end of the middle. It actually had a very similar drop to Avengers Endgame. Avengers Endgame is right there in the middle. It dropped 58.7% in its second weekend. Spider-Man Brand New Day dropped 59.9%, which is better than most of the movies that Marvel has released post-pandemic. And it also opened higher than all of the movies that Marvel has released post-pandemic. If you look at it by that metric, Spider-Man Brand New Day had the 4th lowest drop on its second weekend of any post-pandemic Marvel film, behind Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Deadpool and Wolverine, and Thunderbolts. These are the top domestic weekends for films released in 2026, so it doesn't matter whether it's the opening weekend or not. And of course, last week, Spider-Man Brand New Day had the best opening weekend of the year and of all time at $360 million. Its second weekend release is the third best for any movie released this year. The thing splitting those two weekends is the opening of Toy Story 5, which made $159.6 million back in June. It came in ahead of the opening three-day weekend of the Super Mario Galaxy movie. It came in ahead of the opening of the Odyssey, as well as the opening of Michael. The seventh best weekend gross for a film this year was the second weekend of the Odyssey at $90 million. Then we had the opening of The Mandalorian and Grogu, Backrooms, and Project Hail Mary. And Spider-Man Brand New Day has also become one of the 10 highest grossing films of all time domestically. At number 10, it bumps Jurassic World off of that list, and it will soon pass Titanic. And this is bizarre to me because I remember Titanic's box office run when it broke all those records. It was the highest grossing movie of all time, and I genuinely didn't think any movie could ever possibly make that much money. And yet, if Avengers Doomsday makes more later this year, or any other movie, than Titanic did, Titanic will then be off of the all-time domestic top 10 grosser list, which, if you lived through the release of Titanic back in the late 90s, is just a bizarre concept. And yet another reason why I think adjusting for inflation does add some context to box office numbers. But that shouldn't take away from Spider-Man Brand New Day and the fact that it broke into the all-time top 10 after just 10 days. Titanic is at number 9. Then we have Infinity War, Avatar: The Way of Water, Black Panther, Top Gun: Maverick, which is currently the 5th highest grossing movie of all time, the original Avatar back in 2009, Spider-Man: No Way Home, Avengers: Endgame, and Star Wars: The Force Awakens, which is currently the highest grossing domestic film of all time at $936.6 million. But where will Spider-Man Brand New Day end up when it comes to the highest domestic grossing films of all time? Even though it's just been 10 days, I don't think it's too early to start looking at how its cumulative gross is looking compared to the other 5 films in the top 5. So this is how that chart looks through 10 days of release. Spider-Man Brand New Day is the green line that is currently on top, and you can see that it is currently pacing ahead of Avengers: Endgame. It is quite a bit ahead of Star Wars: The Force Awakens, which currently has the all-time domestic record. The red line there is Spider-Man: No Way Home. They're kind of clustered up toward the top. Those are the big openers. Then we have Avatar and Top Gun: Maverick, which are down there a little bit lower. Those were slower burns at the box office. It's going to be interesting to see if that gap closes as time goes on. Now, a lot of people are already crowning Spider-Man Brand New Day because it is so far ahead of The Force Awakens at this point, but I'm not ready to go that far because The Force Awakens came out during the holidays. It had a very extended box office run, a lot of daily grosses after that Christmas window going into New Year's that I think are going to exceed what we see for Spider-Man Brand New Day. So I'm not yet ready to say that it is even really in position to take the number 1 all-time spot, but it is certainly in contention, and certainly even more so in a good position to become maybe the second film to ever cross the $900 million mark domestically. But this is a long game. I'm not ready to crown anybody at this point. There's a lot of box office math to be done between now and a new potential number 1 all-time domestic earner. This is what Spider-Man Brand New Day looks like when you compare it to the other top 10 films in the Spider-Verse. It's currently number 2 behind Spider-Man No Way Home, but gaining quickly, and it is well ahead of the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man, as well as Spider-Man Far From Home and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. That's the rest of the top 5. Spider-Man 2, Spider-Man 3, Spider-Man Homecoming, The Amazing Spider-Man, which is Andrew Garfield's first film, and Venom: Let There Be Carnage round out the all-time top 10 for films in the Spider-Verse. But when you adjust for inflation, Spider-Man No Way Home is still in the top spot with over $1 billion in inflation-adjusted numbers, and Sam Raimi's first 2 Spider-Man films are at numbers 2 and 3. The 2002 original is at $815.4 million adjusted for inflation, and Spider-Man 2 is at $689.8 million adjusted for inflation. But Spider-Man Brand New Day is right there at number 4, well above Spider-Man 3. Spider-Man Far From Home is at number 6, followed by Spider-Man Homecoming. So all 4 of Tom Holland's films are in this top 10, as well as all 3 Tobey Maguire movies. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is in 8th position here at $427.1 million. And then we have the 2 Andrew Garfield films, The Amazing Spider-Man at $400.6 million, and The Amazing Spider-Man 2 at $301.6 $1.6 million. So Venom, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on what you think of those movies, shut out of the all-time Spider-Verse top 10. It's an all Spider-Man affair. And speaking of the Spider-Verse, I asked members here on the channel last week what their favorite Spider-Verse movie is, and we had a definitive winner with 49 votes. Spider-Man 2 came in first place, and while it's probably my second favorite Spider-Man movie, I can't really debate that result very much. It's a very good movie. My personal favorite Spider-Man movie, Into the Spider-Verse, came in second place with 39 votes, and then its sequel, Across the Spider-Verse, came in third place with 28 votes. So the two animated Spider-Man films with a good showing, taking two of the top three spots. Sam Raimi's original 2002 film comes in fourth place with 19 votes. Then we have Spider-Man No Way Home with 18 votes. And Spider-Man Brand New Day, despite just coming out, comes in sixth with 12 votes. Far From Home brought in 6 votes. Spider-Man Homecoming brought in 5. 4 votes went to Madam Web, which it's got to be a bit, right? I mean, there's no way that Madam Web gets more votes than both of Andrew Garfield's films, which got 1 vote apiece. But sure, let's do it for the lulz. Why not? Getting no votes in this poll were Spider-Man 3, which kind of surprised me that not one person named Spider-Man 3. I don't know, maybe it's not that surprising. And none of the villain spin-off films received votes apart from Madam Web, which means that the Venom trilogy, Morbius, and Kraven the Hunter were completely shut out of this poll. And if you want to participate in polls like these, as well as get early access to some of my videos and custom badges and emoji to use here on the channel, then you can become a channel member. Just check the description to see how you can do that. I'd love to have you come and be a part of the channel and hear your voice in these polls, which I run every single week. Spider-Man Brand New Day is also making its way up the all-time MCU domestic gross list. It's currently the 5th highest grossing MCU film domestically, about $25 million behind Avengers Infinity War. Black Panther currently is the 3rd highest grossing MCU film at $700 million. Then we have Spider-Man No Way Home at $814.8 million and Avengers Endgame at $858.3 million. Deadpool and Wolverine, The Avengers, Avengers Age of Ultron, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and Captain Marvel round out the all-time MCU top 10. But when you adjust for inflation, the list looks a little bit different. Avengers Endgame comes out on top with $1.1 billion, followed by Spider-Man No Way Home with just over $1 billion. The Avengers comes in at $950.4 million. Black Panther comes in at $935.7 million. And Avengers Infinity War rounds out the top 5, and it's a pretty definitive top 5 with just over $900 million. Then we have Deadpool and Wolverine in 6th place at $688 million. Avengers Age of Ultron at $665 million. And then Spider-Man Brand New Day in 8th position, but in a very good spot. It's going to close that gap and overtake both Age of Ultron and Deadpool and Wolverine on the inflation-adjusted chart in the next few days. Iron Man 3 comes in 9th place at $617 million, and Captain America Civil War rounds out the inflation-adjusted top 10 at $570 million. And we all know that Spider-Man Brand New Day is a phenomenally successful film, but just how phenomenally successful? Well, these are my profitability estimates for the film, given what I estimate is coming back from different markets around the world, as well as the domestic box office. We know that the budget is reported at $225 million. I'm estimating another $150 million to market the film, which puts the total cost at $375 million. Its worldwide gross right now is at almost $1.7 billion. I'm estimating a net return from that $1.7 billion of $755.1 million. When you deduct the cost of making the film from that total, that puts its current estimated theatrical profit, again, according to me, at just over $380 million. That is pure profit, and it doesn't include ancillaries. It doesn't include what the film is going to make on digital or physical media or any of the other income that the movie generated. This is ticket sales only. So this is a phenomenally successful film, and every dollar that it makes from now on out just goes into that profit pile. And as I mentioned before, Spider-Man Brand New Day has also secured its spot as the #1 grossing film of the summer. It is a sequel, as most #1 grossing films of the summer tend to be. And that takes us to our Charts with Dan trivia question for this week. Since 1975, 8 domestic summer box office champions have been original films. And when I say original, I mean not a sequel, a reboot, a remake, part of an ongoing franchise, part of a cinematic universe, and also nothing that is officially officially based on or adapted from pre-existing material or IP, material of any kind. So what are those 8 films? That's the trivia question. If you want to pause and take a few minutes to think about it, you're more than welcome to do that. But here comes the answer. Those 8 films are Finding Nemo. It's the last time it happened, and it was over 20 years ago. Armageddon, Independence Day, The Lion King, which I know is disputed because people say it was based on Hamlet, but it is not credited as officially having been based on Hamlet. It was inspired by a lot of things, as were other movies on this list. Ghost, Ghostbusters, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and The Omen. Top Gun is not on this list because it was officially based on an article about fighter pilots, and I didn't want to play too fast and loose with the requirements here. So 8 movies in the last 50 plus years would qualify as original, wholly original films, and we are not adding to that list this summer with the latest Spider-Man movie. Well, Spidey's not the only box office hero that's out there racking up big grosses. We also have Christopher Nolan and his latest film, The Odyssey, and it has also been moving up a few lists in the wake of Spider-Man Brand New Day. First of all, The Odyssey is now Christopher Nolan's second highest grossing domestic film of all time. It has passed The Dark Knight Rises, and it is closing quickly on The Dark Knight, only about $70 million behind to take that #1 overall spot. So Chris Nolan could have a new domestic box office champion by the time we reach the end of the summer. Of course, adjusted for inflation, the story is a little bit different. The Dark Knight is at #1 at $866 million, and The Dark Knight Rises is at #2 at $683.3 million, so it's a much higher mountain for The Odyssey to climb, although it is currently at #3, which is not too shabby. At $461.3 million, it has passed the inflation-adjusted grosses of Inception and Oppenheimer, as well as Batman Begins, Interstellar, Dunkirk, Insomnia, and The Prestige, which rounds out the inflation-adjusted top 10 at $91.3 million. And we also talked about this last week, whether The Odyssey has found profitability. It has broken the $1 billion worldwide mark. It's now over $1.1 billion. And I am now estimating that The Odyssey has turned a theatrical profit. It has grossed $1.1 billion worldwide. I'm estimating that $521 million of that $1.1 billion has come back to the studio, versus costs of $375 million, and I'm even deducting the reported 20% that Christopher Nolan and or his producing partner, Emma Thomas, get of the net gross before anything goes back to the studio. So even deducting 20% of the net gross coming back to investors for this movie, it is still profitable, I estimate right now, to the tune of $41.8 million. And again, that number is just going to go up, and it doesn't include physical media. It's probably going to sell very well on 4K. There are lots of revenue streams still to come for The Odyssey, but I am also estimating that it is now making money based purely on ticket sales. And for a 3-hour-long R-rated Greek epic, or at least an epic based on a Greek poem, that's pretty impressive. So we're now into August. Last week, there were a lot of movies that stayed out of the way of Spider-Man Brand New Day's second weekend, but we have some big releases, or at least notable releases, that are hitting theaters this weekend. We'll talk about those at the end of the show. And one of those is The End of Oak Street, starring Anne Hathaway and Ewan McGregor. And because it involves some sort of prehistoric time travel shenanigans, that leads us to our Charts with Dan member poll question. It is kind of an open-ended question this week. Other than the Jurassic Park/World franchise, what is your favorite movie that's about or features dinosaurs? I'm going to let you define it. I often put very strict protocols and limits on these things. I'm going to let you define whether or not a movie counts. Leave your answer right now in the member poll on the YouTube channel page. The only thing I ask is that if the answer that you want to leave is already there, please upvote that answer, especially for a question as open-ended as this one, because it makes tabulating the results so much easier. And those results will be revealed right here on next week's Charts with Dan. All right, let's turn now from the domestic box office to the top movies internationally, which is all markets outside of the US and Canada. These are the top 5 films in the international market. No surprise here, Spider-Man Brand New Day brought in another $236 million at number 1, and it had a similar drop internationally to the one that we saw domestically. It dropped 58.7%. The Odyssey nearly held steady. I think it opened in South Korea this past weekend, but it still has an opening in China yet to come. It brought in another $79.2 million, just a 7% drop from the previous weekend. Paw Patrol, the Dino movie, which will be hitting theaters here in the United States this upcoming weekend, got a jump start internationally and brought in $23 million. All Wishes Come True, which is an animated film in China. There will be a dubbed version hitting the United States later this year. Dropped 35.4% to bring in $19.4 million. And Chikawa the movie, The Secret of the Mermaid Island, which is apparently sweeping the nation of Japan, had a 38.3% increase over the previous weekend and brought in $11.9 million. When you take those international numbers and you combine them with our domestic numbers, we get the top 10 movies worldwide. And of course, leading the way is Spider-Man Brand New Day, which brought in $380.2 million overall in its second weekend worldwide. That's a 59.2% global drop from its opening weekend, which was a very impressive weekend, and it's now at 1.6, working on $1.7 billion globally. The Odyssey had an overall drop of 18.6% from the previous weekend and brought in another $110.9 million just over the three-day weekend. It's now at $1.1 billion. Paw Patrol, the Dino movie, brought in $23 million for a total of $25 million ahead of its domestic opening later this week. All Wishes Come True brought in $19.4 million. It's over $200 million, basically just from the Chinese market alone. Toy Story 5 brought in $13.5 million as it heads to $1.1 billion globally. Minions and Monsters brought in $12.7 million. Chikawa the movie, The Secret of the Mermaid Island, comes in 7th place worldwide. Moana falls to 8th place with $8.5 million. Its global total now just $281.2 million, which is not good news when you look at how much it costs to produce. At number 9 is another animated film from China called To Your Island with $7.5 million. And holding on to that number 10 spot worldwide is Obsession, which dropped just 23.7% and brought in another $6 million globally. It's trying to crack that $500 million worldwide mark. These are the top worldwide weekend performances for 2026 releases, and Spider-Man Brand New Day had the best opening of any film so far this year, and also the best second weekend at $380.2 million. So basically, the second weekend of Spider-Man Brand New Day globally was still bigger than the opening of any other movie this year. The second place movie is the Super Mario Galaxy movie, which made $314.1 million on its opening weekend around the world. So Spider-Man Brand New Day, not just the best opening, but kind of the best opening times two, because even its second weekend was better than any other film hitting the market so far this year. And when we look at the worldwide grosses for films in the MCU, Spider-Man Brand New Day is already at number 4 on this list at $1.6 billion. It's behind Spider-Man No Way Home at $1.9 billion, and it's looking to become just the third MCU film to crack the $2 billion mark. Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame are currently the only two movies that have done that. Spider-Man Brand New Day is well on its way to doing that. I don't know if it's going to get up to $2.8 billion. We'll see, but I think that it's pretty safe to say it's going to at least go ahead of Avengers Infinity War. The rest of the top 10 includes The Avengers at number 5, Avengers Age of Ultron at number 6 at $1.4 billion, Black Panther at number 7 at $1.34 billion, and right behind that, Deadpool and Wolverine at number 8. Then we have Iron Man 3 at number 9 and Captain America Civil War at number 10. All 10 of the highest grossing MCU films of all time worldwide are over $1 billion, and there's a few not on the top 10 that have also cracked the $1 billion mark. And while The Odyssey may be chasing Batman domestically, it has passed both Dark Knight films to become Christopher Nolan's highest grossing film of all time worldwide at $1.1 billion. It passed The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, so anything else it makes is just going to cement its number 1 status. It's also only the third Christopher Nolan film to cross the $1 billion mark. Oppenheimer fell just short a few years ago at $975.8 million. And it is the second highest grossing R-rated film of all time worldwide. It has passed Oppenheimer and Joker. If it can bank another $225 million or so, then it will pass Deadpool and Wolverine and become the top grossing R-rated film ever around the world. And it's not just The Odyssey and Spider-Man Brand New Day. I mean, they get most of the ink, but Toy Story 5 has also been moving up the Pixar worldwide chart. It is currently the third highest grossing film globally in Pixar history at just under $1.1 billion, and it's going to see if it can make a run at Incredibles 2 and that number 2 spot before its box office story ends. So let's turn now from the worldwide box office back to the domestic box office and look at what I call some of our specialty charts. And we'll start with the top per theater averages this past weekend. At number 1 was Tony, which is from A24. It stars Dominic Sessa as a young Anthony Bourdain, so it's kind of a biopic of young Anthony Bourdain. It played in just 6 theaters, but brought in $58,165 per theater. That's one of the best numbers of the year. And right behind it is the latest movie from Jane Schoenbrunn, Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma, which brought in $49,921 per theater in 5 theaters. Both of those movies are going to be rolling out to more theaters in the weeks to come. At number 3, playing in just 1 theater, is a documentary called Burning Down the House, which brought in just over $33,000 in that 1 theater. It's about the challenges faced by today's firefighters. Then we have Spider-Man Brand New Day, which brought in $32,000 per theater in each of its 4,487 theaters. And finally, we have Late Fame, which played in 2 theaters and brought in $20,000 per theater. Late Fame stars Willem Dafoe as an aging poet whose work inspires a new generation, including an actress played by Greta Lee. And as I mentioned, Tony put up one of the best per theater figures we've seen so far this year. It comes in at number 5 behind Maddie's Secret, really just behind Maddie's Secret, and not too far behind Pillion at number 3. Spider-Man Brand New Day with the second best per theater gross of the year at $80,000 on its record-breaking opening weekend. And the best per theater average still by far is Charlie XCX's film The Moment back in January, which opened to over $100,000 per theater in just 4 theaters. These were the top films in limited release, which I define as fewer than 1,000 theaters. At number 1 is Cat Video Fest, which was a top 10 movie. It played in 255 theaters. Then we have DC, which played in 280 theaters and brought in $366,000. DC is a Tamil language action film from India. At number 3 is the documentary Cookie Queens, which played in 446 theaters and brought in $350,000. It is a documentary following 4 Girl Scouts as they try to be the top cookie seller of the year. It played out of competition at Sundance. I didn't get a chance to see it, but I heard very good things about it. At number 4 is Tony, which brought in $348,000 total from its 6 theaters. And at number 5 is Korean Kanakaraju in 200 theaters, bringing in $337,000. It is a Telugu language film from India about a man possessed by a spirit from Korea. This is what the 2026 annual domestic box office looks like, and we have a new number 1. Spider-Man Brand New Day vaults up 4 spots to become the highest grossing film of the year domestically at $654.3 million. That bumps Toy Story 5 down to number 2 for now, although the Odyssey is close behind at number 3. The Super Mario Galaxy movie moves down to number 4, and Michael moves down to number 5. Number 6 through 10 stay the same, with Project Hail Mary, Obsession, The Devil Wears Prada 2, Backrooms, and The Mandalorian and Grogu rounding out the top 10, although Minions and Monsters is knocking at the door. So we'll see if it can displace The Mandalorian and Grogu, knock a Star Wars movie out of the overall top 10 domestic box office, and get that number 10 spot. These are the top films of the 2026 worldwide box office, and like we saw domestically, Spider-Man Brand New Day has vaulted to the top of this chart as well at $1.66 billion. The Odyssey moves up 3 spots to become the second highest grossing film of the year at $1.1 billion, ahead of Toy Story 5, which falls to number 3. Michael falls down to number 4, and the Super Mario Galaxy movie falls down to number 5. So the top 5 all billion-plus dollar grossing films. As I mentioned a couple weeks ago, this is the first time since 2019 that there have been 5 or more billion-dollar grossing films worldwide. The Devil Wears Prada 2 is at number 6, followed by Project Hail Mary, Pegasus 3, Obsession, and Minions and Monsters, which does round out this top 10 list at $473.9 million. And this is a new thing that I've started tracking. The highest grossing actors at the domestic box office in 2026. The qualification is that you have to have played a named character in a film. And as anticipated, Zendaya takes over the number 1 spot with $1.16 billion so far at the domestic box office in 2026. That's due to her appearances in the films The Drama, The Odyssey, and Spider-Man Brand New Day. Tom Holland and Jon Bernthal occupy the next 2 spots, tied at $1.11 billion domestically, and that's because they're both in The Odyssey and Spider-Man Brand New Day. Benny Safdie, who was the champion for a few weeks, falls 3 spots to number 4, thanks to his appearances in the Super Mario Galaxy movie and The Odyssey. New to the list is Mark Ruffalo at $690.9 billion. Of course, this is heavily benefited by Spider-Man Brand New Day, and his appearance in Crime 101 puts him above his other castmates in that film. Then we do have the cast of Spider-Man Brand New Day, except for the ones that I've broken out that have appeared in other films. At number 6, also new to the list, Melissa Villaseñor drops 2 spots to number 7 with voice roles in Hoppers and Toy Story 5. Anne Hathaway drops 2 spots to number 8 with $618.6 billion in domestic box office, with 3 films, The Devil Wears Prada 2, The Odyssey, and Mother Mary, although she's going to get a boost because she is the co-star of The End of Oak Street, which hits theaters this weekend. Robert Pattinson is new to the list with over $500 million in domestic box office thanks to his appearances in The Drama and The Odyssey. He's got a couple more yet to come this year. And Coleman Domingo drops 3 spots to number 10 with $488.8 million in domestic box office thanks to his supporting roles in Michael and Disclosure Day. So those are all the box office numbers I have for you. Let's take a look now at the world of streaming. And we'll start now with the latest numbers released by Netflix. New ones will be out later today. This covers the week of July 27th through August 2nd, and these are global numbers. And the most watched program on Netflix in its first full week of release was 72 Hours, which brought in 25.14 million views. That's a comedy starring Kevin Hart. In second place, true crime has really been the story of Netflix this year, and it has not been a remarkably great rating story for Netflix so far in 2026. The Idaho Murders is in second place at 18.18 million views. It is a Netflix true crime series about the shocking 2022 murders of 4 college students in Idaho. Then we have Elise, Shadows of a Woman at number 3 with 17.35 million views. A Toxic Love Story, which I believe is another true crime documentary movie, at 12.86 million views. The Debt Collector at number 5. The Truthers at number 6 with 7.58 million views. The Truthers is a Spanish film about a woman who suspects that her father knows more about her mother's death than it seems. At number 7 is Elite Force Season 1. That's followed by My Daughter's Father at number 8 with 6.82 million views. I mean, this list reads like what you might see in a TV Guide listing for Lifetime back in like 1997. My Daughter's Father is a film from Mexico about a woman who discovers that her daughter's father isn't who she thought it was. At number 9 is Ransom Canyon Season 2, which continues the Netflix trend of returning series not drawing the ratings that the original season did. And at number 10 is Agent Kim Reactivated with just over 5 million views. The Idaho Murders is a true crime series, but as I mentioned, that has been a winning formula for Netflix so far this year because it was the 3rd best debut for any new series on Netflix this year at 18.18 million views, ahead of Michael Jackson, The Verdict at 17.85 million views, and Reality Check, Inside America's Next Top Model. It does come in behind His and Hers at 19.88 million views in its debut week on Netflix, and I Will Find You, which holds the title at 24 million views back in June. Let's turn now to the latest numbers from Nielsen. Now, these are domestic only. These are not global numbers, and they're delayed by about a month because Nielsen just does business that way. So this covers the week of July 6th through the 12th. And let's look first at the most watched streaming movies. At number 1, this top 3 is actually the same as last week, is Project Hail Mary at 15.36 million hours watched, followed by The Sheep Detectives in a distant second place at 6.18 million hours watched, and Enola Holmes 3 in third place at 5.9 million hours watched. Then we have Shipwrecked Nightmare at Sea, a documentary movie on Netflix at 5.5 million hours watched. At number 5, we have Old Henry, which is a movie that's a few years old, starring, I believe, Tim Blake Nelson. Why is it in the top 5? I don't know, but there it is at 5.2 million hours watched. Avatar Fire and Ash comes in at number 6. Spider-Man Homecoming comes in at number 7. This is, again, leading into the release of Spider-Man Brand New Day. Gone Girl debuts at number 8 on Netflix at 3.6 million hours watched. Then we have Lee Cronin's The Mummy with its debut on HBO Max at 3.6 million hours watched. And White Chicks from the Wayans Brothers, sure, why not, at 3.5 million hours watched on Netflix. These were the most watched streaming shows for July 6th through the 12th. At number 1, it's a juggernaut this summer as far as ratings go, is Love Island USA, as it neared the end of its latest season at 33.2 million hours watched. In second place with about half of the viewership is House of the Dragon on HBO Max with 16.15 million hours watched. That second season just wrapped up. Little House on the Prairie on Netflix debuts at number 3 with 15.4 million hours watched. Then we have The Big Bang Theory at number 4, Bluey at number 5, 5, The Last Ship at number 6, Worst Neighbor Ever at number 7, Grey's Anatomy at number 8, I Will Find You at number 9, and Dark Winds on Netflix, making its debut in the top 10 at 11.35 million hours watched. And this is what the top shows look like when you view it by watch time per available episode. So you take the number of hours watched divided by the number of episodes you can watch. That's how you get this number. Worst Neighbor Ever continues to lead the way at 3.42 million hours of watch time per episode. Little House on the Prairie is in second place at 1.93 million hours watched per episode. Then we have I Will Find You in third place. The 5-Star Weekend debuts in the top 5 with 1.31 million hours watched per episode. And then we have Bluey Compilations, which is separate from Bluey the series. I guess Disney put out some compilations of different episodes, but it comes in at number 5 at 1.19 million hours per episode. So way to wring more viewership out of Bluey. Elle, the Legally Blonde prequel series, is at number 6 with just over 1 million hours watched per episode. Then we have House of the Dragon at number 7 at 734,000 hours per episode. Avatar: The Last Airbender stays in the top 10 at number 8 at just over 684,000 hours per episode. Dark Winds is at number 9, and Silo, which I believe just returned for a new season, is at number 10 at 291,000 hours per episode. And those are all the numbers I have for you this week. Before we go, though, I just wanted to take a moment to direct you to some stuff you might be interested in watching, both at home and in theaters. And it is packed this week. There are a lot of movies and even some stuff on TV that are trying to get that last little bit of summer attention. First of all, today we have a few recent movies that'll be available to watch at home through digital rental as well as purchase. Minions and Monsters is available to watch at home, as is Young Washington. The Invite, which if you haven't seen it, is a very good movie, will be available to watch at home today, as well as Gail Daughtry and the Celebrity Sex Pass. On Wednesday, Reacher Season 4 will debut on Amazon Prime Video. You can watch the first 3 episodes of Reacher's 4th season. I gotta respect the fact that this show also is coming out with new seasons pretty much every year. And then there's a whole slew of movies hitting theaters on Friday. Of course, we have The End of Oak Street, which is written and directed by David Robert Mitchell, probably most notable for It Follows. I'm definitely going to check this movie out. You can check the channel here for a review later this week. There's another dinosaur movie hitting theaters this weekend as well, but it's for the kids. It's Paw Patrol, the Dino movie, so you can check that out. Maybe do a double feature with The End of Oak Street, although I don't know if you should bring the kids to both of them. Also hitting theaters this weekend is a movie that looks really interesting to me. It's called The Rivals of Amziah King, and it stars Matthew McConaughey. He plays a man defending his bees and his honey business from people who are out to do him harm. I don't think this is a crossover with Jason Statham and The Beekeeper, but until I see it, I'm just going to assume that that's a possibility. For you history buffs out there, there's a movie from Angel Studios hitting theaters called The Brink of War, starring Jeff Daniels as Ronald Reagan and Jared Harris as Mikhail Gorbachev during a high-stakes nuclear summit. And there's another movie hitting theaters that I'm surprised I didn't really hear about. It's being released by Neon. It's called The Wrong Girls. It's the debut film from writer-director Dylan Meyer, and it's got a great cast. Kristen Stewart and Alia Shawkat play 2 burnouts who accidentally acquire telepathic powers. And the supporting cast includes Cate Blanchett, Seth Rogen, Kumail Nanjiani, and Tony Hale. I haven't seen anything on this movie, but I may try to catch it if I can. I don't know if it's playing near me. Also in many theaters around the country is Six, the musical live. Much like we just saw with Hadestown, this is a pro shot of the 2019 musical about the 6 wives of Henry VIII. And a couple of films are celebrating their 10th anniversary in theaters this upcoming weekend. Train to Busan will be hitting theaters in a remastered version in some cities around the country, as will Your Name in 4K, celebrating its 10th anniversary. I believe Your Name has a wider release than Train to Busan is having. Those are both really good movies. If you haven't seen them in theaters, this is your chance this upcoming weekend. And also hitting many theaters around the country is a movie called Nimrods. It stars McKenna Grace and Mason Thames as members of a band who believe that they're opening for Green Day and embark on a road trip, and it was actually co-written by some of the members of the band, including Billy Joe Armstrong. Another film celebrating an anniversary and more limited release this upcoming weekend is Wet Hot American Summer, which I think is hilarious. It's one of my favorite comedies of the 21st century, celebrating its 25th anniversary, so you can go check that out. And a couple of Sundance films are hitting theaters in limited release this upcoming weekend. Union County, starring Will Poulter. I thought that the acting particularly was very good in this film. I don't think it was anything groundbreaking on a story level, but a very well acted film. And then one of the best movies I saw at Sundance, but a very disturbing and hard to watch documentary called American Doctor. It's about doctors in America who are in Gaza or trying to get to Gaza to provide medical assistance. It is a harrowing documentary, but also I think one that is very much worth seeing. And then on Sunday, Lanterns, the latest project from the DCU, which is a streaming series featuring 2 Green Lanterns, will make its debut on HBO and HBO Max. I'll definitely be tuning in because I like both actors who are the leads of this show, and I'm curious to see what they're going to do with Green Lantern. And that's everything I've got for you this week. Stay tuned, though, because not only do I have reviews of the end of Oak Street potentially coming up, but D23 is also at the end of the week. There might be some big Marvel announcements, potentially involving a future franchise of mutants and other things that might pop up in the MCU. So if there is big news coming out of D23, I'll cover that here on the channel. I've got my live show planned for tomorrow, and you never know what else is going to bubble up. I didn't expect to be doing an inflation video, the one that came out yesterday. So every day and every week is a new adventure, and I'd love for you to join me on that adventure. So if you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell so you know when I upload a new video. Check the description if you want to know how to become a member. But most of all, thank you for watching this video. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then. Bye.